Mystic Gateway podcast says we're late, so I guess we better go live. Oh, we're live. What's up, Craig? How's it going? Hey guys, welcome back to the show for a special Sunday Night Live. This is something I've been excited about all weekend. We, a friend of mine, a fan of ours, sent me a this Reddit whistleblower testimony late the other night, and I couldn't sleep, and I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. And it's pretty lengthy, so we are going to go through it and read through the whole thing and discuss it along the way. So we're not just reading the whole time. It's quite an impressive testimony, a lot of bold claims, and we'll get into our opinions on the information here in just a little bit. But before we get started, welcome to the show, everybody. And I just want to remind anyone who wants to join us in Hawaii that tickets are still available. 5 days on the Big Island in April, April 20th through the 24th. We cannot wait for it. It's right around the corner. It's going to be here soon. Start planning your trip if you haven't. You can find all that information at journeytotruth.online. And our documentary, A Lifetime of Silence Behind the Green Door, A Case for the Secret Space Program, is coming out January 9th, a soft release here in a theater in Sedona. And immediately following, well, sometime following, as soon as we can get it on Amazon Prime and other streaming platforms, you can find it there as well, if everything works out, which it will. But it's an ambitious project we've been working on for a few years, hitting it hard this past year. Obviously, it's just shy of 2 hours, and it's a very comprehensive outlook into the secret space program. So we cannot wait for everyone to see it. Stay tuned for more information on that. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm good. I'm just recovering from being sick, but I'm good enough to do the show. Luckily,
Well,
this morning I wasn't so sure, but
oh,
it,
really? Well, I'm glad
yeah,
you're feeling
yeah.
better. You should have said something.
I was waiting. I was holding out to see, and I got better enough that I'm like, all right, I think I can do it.
Okay.
But my
Well, I'll
voice
do,
is not, I can tell it's not. So,
well, I can do primarily most of the reading if you'd like.
that would
So,
be great, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it is pretty lengthy, like I said. It's not terribly long, but it's a lot to sit here and read through. But okay, how should we start this? So I started reading this. Actually, I'll just pull it up. I made a little slideshow here. Let me pull it up and share my screen. Any other announcements that we're forgetting? Oh, yeah. So January 16th, 17th, and 18th here in Sedona, the Odyssey Conference. It's a secret space program themed conference put on by Tony Rodriguez. Randy Kramer will be there. Rebecca Rose is flying in for it, and a few other people, and I'll be a part of it. The Friday night on the 16th, Lily Nova is doing a sound bath, and then leading into that, we will be also premiering our documentary Friday night at that event. Saturday is a full day of speakers, which I will not be speaking, but I will be hosting the speaker panel, which potentially, Aaron, I haven't told you this yet. I haven't told you this, but we might actually live stream that speaker panel even on our podcast
Oh,
and just
sweet.
do like a simulcast thing. John thinks that would be a cool idea and for
Yeah,
some
that's
exposure. So
amazing.
so that would be cool. So I'll be doing a roundtable. I'll be hosting a roundtable at that event, and it'll also be broadcasted to our podcast. And then Sunday is a day of like excursions and stuff like that. So you can grab a ticket at I don't even have the link available right now, but I think it's Eventbrite Odyssey Events or something like that. If you go there, you can find it and you grab a ticket and come hang out. It's right around the corner, January 16th, 17th, and 18th. And anything else that we should announce before we get started? Share. Okay. All right. So this guy claims we're only getting part of the truth. This is just a thumbnail I put here as a first slide. And before we get into his testimony, he talks about Earth cousins from Iridani B, which that reminded me immediately of, you can see the screen right, Aaron.
Yeah.
That reminded me immediately of this episode with Forrest Crawford, which is one of our most underrated episodes, I would say.
Oh, totally.
I encourage everyone to go watch it. I mean, if someone like redacted or somebody like had this guy on, it would just be, it would blow up. But I can't stress the importance of this episode enough. I think it's amazing information, and sometimes it surprises me the episodes that I think are going to take off don't. But I highly encourage everyone to go back and watch this one if you haven't. It's about a crash retrieval program where we recover a downed UFO that has humans inside of it, and they're from Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani, which is so I looked up the difference between Epsilon Eridani and Eridani B. Epsilon Eridani is the star itself, a K-type orange dwarf, while Epsilon Eridani B is the confirmed gas giant exoplanet orbiting it. So there is a difference, but nevertheless, this guy is talking about UFO that crashed here, and there were ETs inside that were human. He said they look no different than us. In fact, the only difference he said they all had the connected earlobe, and then they told him the reason that they actually, well, Oscar, the guy who was actually communicating with the humans whenever it crashed, because they would really only talk to this one guy. They told him that that's how you know who has that DNA from the Tau Ceti or the Eridani region is because they have the connected earlobes. So it's a like an extraterrestrial trait essentially. So anyone out there with connected earlobes, I've also heard from somebody else that that's a good way to tell if someone's a clone. So it's just theories, right? I don't know. Um, but what's interesting is that I don't know where I was going with that part of the story, but yeah, he claims that they're human and from that region of space. And the SETI Institute, which is the search for extraterrestrial life, refers to the scientific efforts primarily using radio telescopes like the Allen telescope array to detect signals or evidence of intelligent life beyond Earth. So the very first two stars that they looked at in 1984 were Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani. Those are the first two stars that they pointed these satellites at to try and communicate with. Out of all the stars in the skies they could have picked. Now, why would they do that unless they understood there was some connection there? That we had some inkling to believe that there was life on those planets. So, just another interesting side note before we get into this testimony. And let me see what else. But yeah, he claimed that they're absolutely human. You wouldn't tell the difference. You would never know the difference. And then let me pull up the testimony and let's get started here. Okay, here we go. Can I make that any bigger? Yes, I can. So from this account, this is actually 23 days ago, so it's about a month ago, but it's new to me and us and most people who haven't read this. So this account r-ufos says, you wanted disclosure. I am a whistleblower recently, quote unquote, retired from the inside, and you're only getting part of the truth. Now, after reading through this, it's very apparent that he is also only getting part of the truth. And I think this is a golden example of the compartmentalization in the private sector. Wouldn't you agree with that, Aaron?
100%. Yeah.
Because I mean, what was your analysis on, without giving away too much yet, just overall, what did you think of this? Like, obviously, it resonated, but there was, he didn't have the full picture.
It definitely strongly resonated, but yeah, absolutely didn't have the full pic, like, which isn't, which is actually to be expected, no matter what. But you know, as we know, everything's super compartmentalized,
Mr.
and
King,
there's
podcast.
usually some disinfo mixed with real info as well, even in most, if not every compartment. But the majority of this, I think, is true and strongly resonated, but it's just one thing.
Yeah,
So somebody might read this, especially somebody that is more in the kind of mainstream surface level ufology, UFO, UAP kind of kind of community where, to them, this is like way out of that box, right? This is like mind-blowing disclosure to somebody that has never like heard this deep level of information. They might just think, oh, this is what's going on, and think it's just that. Whereas
Right.
like, okay, this might be true, but it's one thing of like a multitude of this whole complex, you know,
Yeah.
ecosystem of truth that of things that are actually going on. This is just one. But I do resonate. I think they're even if like the details of this are off or changed, I think the general thing is definitely real.
Right.
And
Yeah, he might be saying Eridani B when it really is Epsilon Eridani. So they're,
right,
sending us to the wrong star or whatever.
right, which I think they do a lot
Yeah,
with.
they absolutely do.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. There's a lot to get through. So, from unverified whistleblower. Hi, so I heard y'all want a disclosure, right? All right, I hope you have time for this because there's a lot. Grab a coffee or maybe get comfy with a pillow somewhere. I've been watching the news and hearing a lot of things I know to be true, shockingly being talked about openly by some higher ups in a documentary, so I figured what the hell. I'm almost wondering if he's talking about Age of Disclosure documentary. I'm not sure. He goes, "You can
Could
call
be.
me Ray. How would you say that? Ray? Ria? Ray?
Ray.
You you can call me Ray, not my real name obviously, but it will do. A little about me. I spent about 8 years in the military to pay for college and then another decade plus in a part of the U.S. intelligence component that does not officially exist. On paper, I worked for a boring sounding office in a department most people have never heard of. In reality, it was a compartment inside a compartment where the odd stuff of a certain nature got routed. My actual specialty is electro optics, laser sensors, EO imaging systems, the math and the hardware behind we did the math and hardware behind how we detect things at a distance and in some cases put energy on them. This is what I trained for, and in most cases, and most of what I did, my serious work on once I was all right, I need to recalibrate here. What I did most of my serious work on once I was off the deployment treadmill. So when I say I know something about directed energy weapons and weird sensor returns, that's not I heard this from a friend of a friend. That was my day-to-day job. Most of my career was boring in the way dangerous jobs are boring. Long days and windowless rooms, Iraq and Afghanistan in the early years, doing the usual mix of um, whatever that is, Signet and human
Um,
uh,
I can look that up. Hold on.
support, phone records, pattern of life workups, building target packets on people who never know my name but might notice a drone overhead later. After I got out of a uniform, I slid over to contractor work, then pulled into the permanent government side.
Can we pause real quick?
Yeah.
So SIGINT is short for signals intelligence, and it's the practice of intercepting and analyzing electronic signals, including communications like phone calls, emails, non-communication. So it's like any signals or communication intelligence, basically. And then HUMINT is human intelligence, and that's intelligence gathered from human sources through interpersonal contact. Um, so human intelligence. Okay, so he basically worked in both of those. Just to
Okay.
clarify what that was,
All
what
right.
that means.
So let's see if I can get through this.
So he's using real military intelligence terms just
Right.
as a data point.
Yeah, good notice. For a long time, my world was very normal: counterterrorism, sanctions, evasion, shady cargo, going through weird ports, stuff like that. After that, foreign missiles test and what you have probably seen described publicly as space domain awareness. Basically, watching dots move around the sky and trying to decide whose dots they were and what they were doing. The weird part started when I was detailed to a small interagency working group looking at what was called anomalous aerospace and undersea systems. Translation: things detected and showing up on sensors that did not match any known platform, did not behave like clutter, and did not go away when you changed radar modes or swapped optical systems. I was there because I understood both sides of the question, the physics of the sensors and the intelligence context. You get taught very quickly to treat anything unexplained as a glitch, a calibration issue, operation error, software artifacts, anything that keeps your world tidy. You get used to hearing the weird glitch as a catch all, except after a while, you notice some of those glitches kept showing up across different systems, different countries, decades apart. Same behaviors, same basic locations, same signature that never quite fits. At some point, you either admit there is a real pattern or you drive yourself crazy trying not to see it. If you are useful and you if you're useful and you start asking questions or asking the wrong questions for long enough, someone eventually pulls you aside, takes you to a skiff, takes your phone, and has you sign your life away again and shows you the next layer of the onion. This onion goes so deep I doubt that even after years of briefings, I've been exposed to anything below a few layers. Even still, most of this is purposely kept off the NIPR and the JWICS and is done in person. So, obviously, two more military terms. If you felt like looking up, you can, Aaron.
Um,
So, I'll keep
I won't look
reading.
those up for now.
Yeah,
But to me, though, like it at least it makes if this is a so-called LARP or somebody making it up, they at least did a good amount of research um and figuring out those terms and all this other stuff that lines up with a real military intelligence
right,
person, right? So to me, that lends a little more credibility to the thing,
right. Where is my Zoom or my menu here?
at least more likely to be real, in my opinion.
Okay, well, let's keep moving then. That is where I learned about most of what you're interested in here and what seems to be bubbling to the surface in the news lately. That when I learned about what we call the council, yes, aliens, and I suspect you're not likely to see a lot of what I know mentioned, even by some of who know it, who have begun speaking out for reasons I'll get into later. I've never met them face to face. Everything I know about them is from briefings, documents, and one secure video session that I honestly wish I had skipped. But it lines up with too many independent data points to just shrug off as somebody's pet theory. The basic story is this. This is where it gets good. Earth was noticed roughly 2 billion years ago, long before anything walked around on land, not because we're special, but because we tripped a sensor, or rather, life tripped their sensors. You see, the Council is not a single species. It is a collective of several advanced interstellar, maybe even interdimensional civilizations that run long term surveys of stars and planets the way we run spy satellites, huge distributed arrays of instruments working together, watching thousands of star systems at once for millions of years at a time. Their gear probably makes the James Webb telescope look like a kid's backyard telescope. About 2 billion years ago, those instruments picked up biosignatures here, chemical fingerprints in the atmosphere that meant something was alive here. Atmospheric composition like free oxygen and methane, spectral fingerprints, chemical disequilibria that screams that scream there's metabolism happening down there. You know the basics. At that point, Earth went into a database as interesting, revisit later. Standard procedure for them when a world looks promising is pretty boring from their point of view. They send automated probes, not big crude ships like you see in sci-fi movies, just small, tough, very smart machines. Those probes come in, mostly target the oceans and set up self-replicating facilities on the sea floor. So that's interesting to me. They don't come here and land on the surface. They go straight to the ocean floor and set up self-replicating facilities on the sea floor. Those facilities use local materials to build more facilities, more probes, craft that can operate underwater, in the air, in near space, and eventually avatars that can interact with whatever life evolves. These biological, or rather biomechanical avatars are what some people who claim to have been abducted have likely experienced, though they do have what we call ASI. These beings are not gods. They are technology and they aren't perfect. They make mistakes, glitch out, etc. And at any point, if you want to chime in on something, Aaron, just let me know.
Okay.
The reason they base all of that underwater for the reason they base All of that underwater is for a simple reason. The bottom of the ocean does not care about ice ages, political empires, climate swings, or wars. Temperatures and pressure change slowly over long periods of time. It is a fairly stable environment and for much of human history has been mostly inaccessible. Speaking of time, we Earth humans tend to think in terms of nothing longer than the current human lifespan, and when pondering non-human intelligence, we like to think of in terms of deep space, distance, and light years, but we seldom consider the lifespan and concept of time for a post-biological species could be quite different than ours. Only our most astute thinkers in the realms of geology, paleontology, cosmology think in the terms of millions or billions of years, geologic epochs, cosmological history. That is child's play for the council, which has a different concept of time, more concerned with deep time, millions of years at a stretch. As such, their infrastructure is designed for that. So they're claiming that this group called the Council, which is a conglomeration of interstellar, interdimensional, and extraterrestrials, came here 2 billion years ago and set up shop on our ocean floors. Let me get caught back up where I'm at. Okay. So yes, a lot of the TMOs, transmedium objects, and impossible accelerations you have heard about are just their hardware doing its job. Maintenance, observation, sampling, nothing heroic. The warp bubble Alcubierre effect was probably mastered by them before our solar system even existed. It's old tech for them, kind of like the wheel for us, kind of like the wheel is to us. Also, no, we are not the center of anyone's universe. There are about 1 billion planets in our galaxy that are more or less like Earth. Some just have microbes, some have more complex life. A smaller subset of those have or once had civilizations. We are just one we are just one more entry, a fairly recent one in cosmological terms, in a very large survey. Once early humans started doing interesting things, we moved from planet with life to planet with potential. They have watched this same story unfold in slightly different ways around 1,000 times from what I understand. Chemistry leads to biology, biology creates technology. Tool use, language, agriculture, cities, industry, energy, space travel. Somewhere in there, you always hit the same fork. Either the species figures out how not to blow itself up to pieces densities, with the energy densities, it increasingly, let me read that sentence again. Either the species figures out how not to blow itself to pieces with the energy densities it increasingly has access to, such as nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, antimatter, and more exotic matter energy, or it wipes itself out. Our situation worried them. We had a little paradox, extremely good at cooperation and also extremely good at organized violence. Our aggression stood out. Cooperation plus violence isn't unique, but we were very, very good at both. And once you get to things like nuclear power, that combo tends to end very badly. They'd seen plenty of variations of that play out over at least a few billion years. About 10,000 years ago, our trajectory towards about 10,000 years ago, our trajectory towards that became clear, and there was a major argument inside the council about what, if anything, to do with us. One side said that odds favored self-destruction once we discovered and weaponized atomic level technologies. The other side argued that we were worth saving or at least worth understanding better. The compromise was an experiment, one which had ramifications as to why all of this has been going on for so long. Okay, so I had it wrong when I made my video. I said 65,000 years ago. I had that wrong and I should have fact checked that. So, roughly 65,000 humans were removed from Earth and relocated to what is basically a preserve on a planet around the star you know as 82 Eridani. Internally, we call these people the Arids. The star is in our catalogs if you feel like looking it up, but the details of the target planet are not available for public reasons. The Arids were started in a kind of controlled paradise. Their world has large dis. Okay, I just need to take a drink of water. So let's talk about that for a second. So I'm assuming I had those two numbers backwards. About 10,000 years ago, roughly 65,000 humans were removed from Earth and relocated what is basically a preserve on a planet around a star you know as 82 Eridani. Internally, we call those people Arids. The star is in our catalogs if you feel like looking it up, but the details of the target planet are not public for obvious reasons. The Arids were started in a kind of controlled paradise. Their world has larger dispenser systems that can produce whatever basic material needs they have. Food, clothing, tools, building materials, entire structures for habitation. Think Star Trek replicators scaled up and wired into the environment. In that setup, nobody starves, nobody is homeless in the way we understand it, and nobody spends their life chasing money just to meet needs. This was the Aired's natural reality. The point from the council's view was to remove material scarcity from the equation and see what humans do and achieve when they are not spending most of their energy bashing each other over the head over resources. Meanwhile, the rest of us stayed here on the control planet, Earth, dealing with scarcity, ownership, money, hoarding, and the rise of socio-political systems based on scarcity. All of the things that define Earth civilization. The result, according to what we were briefed, is that the Arids are now 5,000 years ahead of us technologically. Man, I had a lot of the details. I read this in the middle of the night and I was trying to recall. So 5,000 years ahead of us technologically, not 10,000 years. Um, Nevertheless, the result, according to what we were briefed, is that the Arids are now 5,000 years ahead of us technologically averaged out. Same species, same basic biology, same starting point, completely different trajectory because of conditions. Nature versus nurture on a cosmic scale. For most of their history, the Arids thought they were native to that world. They only found out the truth roughly a century ago in our time. They learned that they were uplifted, that their ancestors were taken from Earth, that they have cousins here. Once they knew that, some of them started coming back to visit the original branch. This is where their history intersects with some of the UFO stories you know. That, quote, aliens that look almost exactly human are just that, human. They are not hybrids, not clones, not secretly angels or demons. They are Arids born on another star, showing up here after being given a 10,000 year head start. So I was right, 10,000 year head start. They have, in some cases, met the leaders of certain countries and at least two UN Secretary Generals, both deceased. Now we get to why this has been buried for 80 years. You have to think like a senior U.S. official in the 1940s and 1950s. World War II just ended. The Cold War is starting. Everything is viewed through capitalism versus communism. Then someone puts a briefing in front of you that says, in essence, there is a group of humans living on another world who have no money, no private ownership in the way we structure it, automatic systems that meet their basic needs. And in that environment, they advance thousands of years faster than we have. The men who built what we now call the legacy program in the US that sounded like less let me start that sentence over again. The men who built what we now call the legacy program in the US that sounded less like interesting anthropological data and more like a walking talking advertisement for space communism. It looked like proof that communism works better than the system they were trying to defend, that the ramifications of what could happen if that ever got out terrified them more than the existence of aliens. Though, to be fair, they plenty had their worldview rocked by the latter too. Okay, do you want to chime in with anything there, Aaron?
Excuse me. Um,
No?
I mean it not I mean it just makes sense, so far.
And so, sorry guys, I
That
don't. I don't practice reading out loud, so it's not something I read a lot faster in my head like we all can. So I apologize if I'm fumbling over some of the words.
I mean, it lines up. It lines up with already what I know about the history of when okay, just in general, when the whole UFO ET thing kind of exploded in the 40s and 50s, and our military industrial complex started getting built out in kind of response to that, and also what the Nazis were doing and other things. It was constant. It was like basically this always this overarching thing of like fear-based.
Right.
Like one, we can't tell anyone about this because of how people would react. Two, we don't want our enemies and our and other countries to have access to the same thing we do, and it's all this like you know
Exopolitics.
yeah, but it's all with this thick layer of fear and control and um
Right.
hoarding on to each country and each individual organization is like hoarding onto what they have and not sharing and
Right.
fighting against each other and trying to control the population and you know
Well,
like
let's, yeah,
ridicule it and all this kind of stuff. So it lines up with like also on top of that, if this is true, they're like, well, at that time we're fighting communism and we're it's just very over here in the US, it's very like communism's evil, capitalism, and that is like if you want to make an
right.
argument for communism, well, that is like if it was a pure natural form of I wouldn't even call it communism, but it's you know,
Right.
but it can look like that. So they're like, oh, we definitely can't,
Well,
tell anyone about this because it looks like communism, and
let me
uh,
reread that last part again.
that's what
Uh,
our enemies are. So we can't possibly,
Right. The men who built what we now call the legacy program in the US that sounded less like interesting anthropological data and more like a walking, talking advertisement for space communism, it looked like proof that communism works better than the system they were trying to defend. That and the ramifications of what could happen if that ever got out, I guess that meaning that this information right now, if it ever got out, terrified them more than the existence of aliens did. So they were terrified more that they were actually Earth cousins from, they were us than actual aliens. Though to be fair, um, they had plenty that had rocked their worldview. So to the core of the cover up, so the core of the cover up has never just been, quote, aliens or even their technologies. It has been the systematic implications. The idea that scarcity and ownership are not hard coded into reality, that they are one possible way to run a society, and maybe not the optimal one. That was seen as an existential political threat in the 1940s and 1950s, and some of the people who grew up in that mindset are still steering parts of the program today, which is why we stay out of the way of the dinosaurs as they crash and allow us meek to inherit the earth. That's a quote from something. I forgot where I heard that. But now add in the famous crash retrieval incidents. Roswell 47, Kecksburg 65, and a handful of other retrievals around the US and around the world. What we were told is that most of those were not accidents. They were tests and gifts. The council, with arid input, allowed certain craft and systems to fall into human hands in a controlled way, enough intact technology that a very motivated and capable society could learn from it, not enough that it would instantly rewrite everything. In fact, the Kecksburg landing, it wasn't called a crash internally. It was a direct result of a meeting and gift agreement made at Holloman Air Force Base the year prior. The idea was to see who did what with it, who could figure it out, who kept it secret, who tried to share, who tried to weaponize it, who panicked. Based on those results, the plan was to pick one primary human partner to act as the main interface for the full council contact and begin a managed process of reunifying Earth humans with the Arids and introducing us to the wider community. You can argue whether that is a good way to do it. I am just telling you that is the framework I saw laid out. How's the chat doing? So,
I had to already delete a troll.
perfect. Thank you.
And
In the 1980s and 90s, during a brief period when the Cold War ended, there was a push to finally disclose much of this. This was initially proposed as meeting as this was initially proposed at meeting between U.S. President Ronald Reagan and the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev at the summit in Reykjavik,
Gorbachev.
Gorbachev, yeah, at the summit in Iceland in 1986. Also discussed was getting rid of nuclear weapons, as had to be urged by the Council. In the end, it was decided to wait. There were two more U.S. pushes for disclosure between then and the 2017 New York Times article, one during the Clinton administration and another during the transition between the Obama and the first Trump presidency. Now, for the part that put a clock on all this stuff you've been hearing about 2027, etc. About 3 years ago, a species that is hostile to the council found out about the Earth Project. They are not part of the collective. They resent the way the council handles younger civilizations, as themselves felt victimized by the council. They also resent the credit the council gets for, quote, successful cases. I have heard them described as jealous neighbors who would rather break your toys than watch you win. Yes, sometimes we joke about this stuff because it's the only way to stay sane with this everyday knowledge and integrate it into your civilian life of Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas shopping, taking kids to soccer practice, etc. Just an aside, ever consider how two of the biggest holidays of they so there's some typos in this. Just as an aside, ever consider how two of the biggest holidays of they involve gluttony. I don't know what he's trying to say there. Two of the biggest holidays of the year, oh, I see, of the year involve gluttony, Thanksgiving, and overconsumption, Black Friday. When you have the knowledge many have within the program, stuff that is taken for granted seems really weird and a symptom of the now forced scarcity of our current system. So yeah, I can imagine why holidays would seem very weird to certain people.
yeah.
Anyway, back to the aliens. The hostile group I mentioned decided to spoil the experiment. This species is ahead of us technologically, but far behind the Council, though they also inhabit a relatively nearby star cosmologically speaking. Their travel is slower, less elegant, and has to take place in stages. Think of it as a space island hopping, which is why this lead time is so long. You probably want to know what they look like physically based on the descriptions we saw. They are about 5 feet tall, segmented bodies, multiple limbs, basically ant-like in their overall form. Nothing subtle or humanoid about them. And it's interesting that they said they have to space like island hop. If you read the Serpo expedition, the Serpo journey, that's exactly how they got to Serpo. They basically had to
Mhm.
portal hop like through. You have to like a cosmic web that, and there's certain alignments, and you can't just go from point A to point B. You have to go. You have to basically island hop, like they're explaining.
And that's even a more primitive, um, the more
Yeah,
primitive civilizations are the only ones that do that, right?
exactly, which makes a lot of sense if you actually read about the Ebens and who they were and their technology and stuff. It was
Right.
not that far in advance of us,
Right. Comparatively speaking,
comparatively, right?
still probably, yeah,
They launched.
1,000 years ahead or hundreds of years ahead.
Okay, so here's more about these ant beings. They launched an expedition toward Earth with the stated goal of making a mess, cause chaos here, damage the experiment, and embarrass the council by showing they cannot protect their own projects due to internal disagreements. Basically, exploiting internal fissures, turning small cracks of understanding in the council into canyons, thus destroying it. That's their hope, at least. The transit time means for us they are expected to arrive in roughly 2 years from now, the 2027 holiday present no one asked for, which 2027 comes up quite a bit among other testimonies. I think Jeremy Corbell talked about something. Charles McNeil talked about a 2027 arrival. And I actually think the Sands of Time material hints at something coming around that time period as well. So it's either that's actually happening or this is a disinfo campaign that they want out there. And I think both are possible.
Yeah.
The news that triggered a major debate within the council. One group said the rules say non-interference. We watch and record what happens, even if it is ugly, as we have done in the past. The other group said we effectively created this civilization by tagging and monitoring this world. We have a moral obligation not to would just watch a civilization we have been studying get smashed by someone else's grudge. If the council showed up in force, it would not be much of a fight. Their technology relative to the ant species is like a modern carrier group versus skilled archers on sailboats. The whole thing would be over quickly, and it would also completely blow the point of letting a young species find its own way, which is, I guess, what they're doing with us. But how can you find your own way whenever you're suppressed?
Exactly.
It would also be a tremendous blow to the human ego, which the council is well aware of. So they arrived at a compromise. No direct council fleets defending Earth, no obvious intervention. Instead, they would quietly arm us. What they chose to give us are things they roughly call scalar phase weapons. Our vocabulary is not great here. They are not just high power lasers. They interact with fields we do not fully understand or really have names for, yet shift phases dump huge amounts of energy from the vacuum into very specific volumes of space-time without a conventional bright beam or explosion. Compared to our current directed energy weapons, they are an enormous leap. As someone who has spent years working with lasers and optic systems, I can tell you that they sit so far off our current tech that if you saw the damage assessments from a pulse without context, you would think they were misprints. But compared to console weapons, they are Nerf guns, training wheels per se. Anyway, that decision set off another big argument, both among them and among us. The obvious concerns the obvious concern was simple. Once the external threat is gone, what stops us from turning these things on each other the same way we took nuclear power and turned it into thousands of warheads and aimed at our own cities? So I guess they don't want that directed energy weapon technology getting into our hands.
Yep.
On the side, on the US side, there were people saying exactly that. And some members of the council argued that if we on Earth roll out scalar systems across arsenals, the first real test after the bugs are gone will likely be some crisis where two human governments start fighting each other up with this technology that they do not fully understand, or start lighting each other up with this technology that they do not fully understand, which is kind of what we're already doing anyway. With any of the time travel tech and any of the advanced technology, I think that if it was gifted to us and we're just haphazardly using it without fully understanding it, not understanding the damage that it is actually causing, I think that's kind of been the case anyway.
Right.
The counter argument, which one, was that species level survival has to come first. If humanity gets wiped out by someone else's petty feud, then the entire debate is academic. Also, if humans fight this off themselves instead of watching the council show up and save the day, they will meet the wider community as people who actually did something, not as rescued primitives, human ego intact. And kill switch, if you will, has been built into the tech to disable it after the conflict, which the council sees us winning. If we then decide to use these weapons against each other, they'll simply be disabled until we humans have learned enough to disable the kill switch, which could be thousands of years from now, for all I know.
Makes a lot of sense.
Right. So, against a lot of internal resistance, the Council has been quietly providing scalar phase systems to several blocks, not just the US. The list I saw included the United States, China, European Union, through specific channels, Russia, and Brazil. Those systems are being integrated into space platforms, aircraft, and undersea assets. Testing is happening in remote places and high altitudes, often disguised as other things. Most of the people physically working on it think it's an advanced homegrown black program. Only a very small circle in each capital sees the full context. I got to see pictures of that I got to see pieces of that picture shortly before I was pushed into retirement, which is a polite way of saying I stopped being convenient. That is as specific as I am willing to get. There is one more reason I am writing this now. After pondering it for a long time, and it is more personal than the 2 year clock. A friend of mine, someone I worked closely with the inside of the program, another EO specialist, executive officer specialist maybe, had been talking quietly years ago about going to Congress. Not with everything. They were, hang on, I need to get a drink real quick. Okay, let me just start that part over. A friend of mine, someone I worked closely with inside the program, another EO specialist, had been talking quietly years ago about going to Congress. Not with everything, they were not suicidal, just enough to force a real closed door hearing in the Senate. Get the true nature of certain SAPs, special access programs acknowledged on paper, make it harder to bury the whole subject under jokes and career threats, which I hope has happened. Over over as a year ago, I got word that they did. Okay, so they did. The official explanation has been vague and unsatisfying. Medical complications on a trip to a black site in the Indian Ocean, which is obviously Diego Garcia. Those medical complications do not match what I know about their health. Then it became a quote, an accident at home with no details anyone will put in writing. People who would normally be candid went very quiet fast. Maybe it was just bad luck. People do die suddenly, but given the threats which are known about the certain IC sectors when one is associated with this subject, I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that long-lasting civilization I had, that long-lasting com what I do know is that long conversation I had with them about whether it was worth trying to
The
talk.
last, the
Yeah,
last long conversation. Sorry.
I'm getting all tongue-tied here.
Yeah.
What I do know is that the last long conversation I had with them was about whether it was worth trying to talk to certain congressional staffers for a certain senator. After hearing recent news confirming publicly much of what I know to be true privately, I stopped telling myself I would wait and see how things played out. Life is short. So here we are. Some stranger on the internet telling you an unbelievable story you are free not to believe. With roughly 2 years on the clock and a current rate of leaks and whistleblowers and half disclosures, it is very unlikely they keep all of this under wraps until the first time something openly not from here appears in our sky or our orbit. At some point before that happens, at least one major government, maybe more, is going to go to the public in a controlled way. Going to go public in a controlled way. My guess would be China or the US, but it could be one of the others on that scalar weapons list. You will likely get a very careful worded announcement about unidentified aerial phenomena, about contact with, quote, non-human intelligences, and about defensive technologies and unprecedented international cooperation. It will be designed to manage panic and control the story. What you probably will not hear in the first round of briefings is that is the part about the arids, the economic implications of their society's existence, the billion other habitable planets, the undersea infrastructure that has been here longer than we have had bones. You will not see anyone step up to the podium and say, oh, by the way, there is a branch of humanity that grew up without the idea of money and scarcity 10,000 years ago and advanced 5 millennia past us. That is why I am dumping this here, where people can ignore it, laugh at it, or save it to see how it goes. Like I said, you do not have to believe me. I am not here to sell a book, go on podcast, be on TV, or do UFO lectures / treat this as fiction if that makes you more comfortable. What I am really trying to do is get you to think past the kiddie pool questions. Are UFOs real? Are NHI good or evil? Is not the interesting part. The far more interesting questions are what happens to this planet once everybody knows we are being watched, that we have cousins around another star, that some of the basic assumptions we built our societies around were just one option, not a fundamental law of nature. If in a year or two you start hearing officials talk about our cousins among the stars or civilizations far older than ours and new non-kinetic systems and shared planetary defense, remember this post and see how well it fits. Look, the bugs are coming either way. The council is not going to save us directly. They already handed out the tools and they are watching to see what we do with them. That part is still up to us. Is the part that is still up to us is what kind of world we build if we get through it. Will we go back to the work and beat each other over the head with really advanced sticks, or do we achieve a more enlightened potential? That is all I have, Ray. Okay. Again, I apologize for fumbling through some of that. I'm not a public reader. Okay, so let's break this down. I believe that aspects of this are absolutely the case. As the narrative about bugs coming in 2027, I mean, if it is real, I would say that there are forces that would never let that happen at this point. But according to him, they want to see what we'll do. But seeing what we do could mean our military industrial complex, who has access to the scalar weapons to take down the bugs. So they're leaving the fight up to the secret space program, is the way I understand it. If this is a real incoming fight, if that's if this isn't just complete disinformation, considering this is real and there are these ant-like beings on the way, which definitely seems to be, it corroborates with other testimonies, like I said, about something, some race of beings coming in 2027. Like I said earlier, that could just be something that they want out there. So people are, again, afraid of what's coming in 2027. There could be something to it. And maybe we're actually being told the truth for once. What are your thoughts, Aaron?
Excuse me. I think it's I think it's a very possible. At the same time, I think it's not mutually exclusive that something could be a possible timeline event or a possible event in the future and something that um, doesn't mean it's actually definitely going to happen because I think that's not that's not how time works. That's not how
Right.
anything, things are always changing. Um, Based on mostly just based on where we're at any given point in time and what is happening at any given point in time. And I think though it makes sense to me that something like that would be allowed because in my opinion, everything that's happening, nothing is happening by accident. Everything that's happening, if it's seemingly a negative or destructive thing, it's not like, oh no, this random negative destructive thing happened. It's like that was allowed to happen for a very
Right. It's like a
specific reason that's beneficial to humanity, right?
like a test.
Like a test. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think something like that would be they're like, oh, let's allow this to happen like within, like not they're not going to let it go too far to like wipe us out or anything like that, but allow it to an extent that we we can fight it. And what's that going to do? Right? Multiple things. I think one, which it said here, is like humanity will be like, oh, they're these people that fought and were victorious in this battle, and rather than rescued primitives coming out into the greater galactic community, and then everyone,
Respects
that
us.
kind of marks you from then on as being like, oh, look, they're only here because they were rescued and given special treatment, and they shouldn't be here, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
two, it lets us unify. Because what does that do? If we have this planet currently where all these different countries and different groups are all kind of like, kind of for the most part, not friendly. I mean, friendly to a certain degree, but like there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of like us versus them. There's a lot of
Right.
disunity and division, and that would be, just like Ronald Reagan's speech, which I know and he had a lot of inside info. He's like, I wonder what it would do if it was an alien threat that,
Well,
how it would
somebody,
unify us as a planet. Well, that's exactly, I think, what that would do. Um, and um, and then allow us to come together and be like, hey, now we're all on the same team. for the first time ever in history, we're all on the same
Right.
team. I think that would be
Well,
a very beneficial thing, honestly.
yeah, and Melody says, I think of Starship Troopers movie,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, exactly.
which I do believe there was absolutely tons of disclosure in that movie, and that's why it was kind of written as like a parody, satire type of thing, so that's I think the
Hmm.
hard truths come out in those movies. And
Yeah.
they don't these bugs in space, I don't think that idea comes from thin air. I think it comes from something,
Hmm.
right? Or the spiders on Mars, David Bowie or whatever. It's a concurrent theme across many testimonies and a lot of literature out there, including our ancient past. And you see it even in petroglyphs and
Hmm.
hieroglyphs, and
Yeah.
so it would be silly for us to just discount this stuff, right? Now, could this be true? Could this not be true? I think that it's absolutely on the table as a likelihood and possible. We don't
Hmm.
know if this guy was just told to come out and do this and
Right.
to muddy the waters, but I would not be surprised at all because most of the extraterrestrials we encounter do look very human, indistinguishable, in fact, like Forrest Crawford said in that crash retrieval, which aligns very specifically what he said about the crash retrievals that were gifted to humanity, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe they send out a scout ship and shoot it down, and the pilot doesn't even know that they're going to be part of an experiment because the pilot needs to think that they crash landed too. Maybe both sides are being watched and tested and gauged.
Yeah.
And the Forrest Crawford testimony was that these were humans just from Epsilon Eridani and the Tau Ceti region. So that also aligns with what this guy is
Yeah.
saying.
And
You
think about
can't,
it too. Think about it too. It's like what's been happening for so many decades now is all the advanced technology has been hidden away from humanity, hidden away from um, it's all so compartmentalized and like held on to in secret. Well, what if this is like a catalyst or maybe the catalyst that finally forces the technology to be released to all of humanity and can't be hidden anymore, right?
right,
They're
right,
like, all right, what's a way to get these humans to finally grow up and like release this technology to the well, create a ET race invading and not the negative blue beam that always gets talked about or the fake alien invasion, but one that's allowed, that's organic, but it's only happening because it's allowed. And then that humanity is forced to release the technology to open source to everyone, like in a way, but that's also in a controlled way that doesn't like you're not going to get criminals using it, to take over the planet like we've already had. But in a way that like we are only allowed to use it to fight this war and to unify and use it in a positive way, like it says here. And if we do start trying to use it in a negative way, they can just shut it off like that
right.
until we get to a point where it's able
What
to be safely used again or
what I think is going to happen, like Melody said, the plot of the movie, the main plot of the movie is the world banding together against the bugs. I
Mhm.
don't think it's going to be the world banding together against the bugs. I think they're doing this tiptoe disclosure right now. So the private sector, the secret space program, can fight this battle without interrupting what's happening here on the surface. And
Mhm.
I think they'll still try to give us cover story after cover story. We have
Or it
the
could go that route,
I
right?
think I
Easily
think we
that.
have the disc-shaped satellites that the NASA just put into the sky that are obviously going to be confused for UFOs. They're everything is they're getting all their ducks in a row to have as much plausible deniability for one, and secondly, to have as many excuses and cover stories as possible. So when something real shows up, no one knows what to believe. And,
Yeah.
in a space battle could easily be explained away as heat lightning
Yeah.
or meteor shot, or whatever the
Well,
hell,
they
or a
they already
SpaceX launch.
yeah, it's the same thing they've already been doing with
Right,
just UFOs in general. Oh, those are all Star. You're just seeing Starlink, or those are fake CGI, or that's this or that, or this or that. When in fact we know there's a lot of some of it's explained, but much of it is very real. And the
well,
sightings are off the
yeah,
charts, and they're for like the fact that we're even getting any kind of disclosure, even if it's super controlled, is only because their hands forced into doing that. They have to do, otherwise they never in a million years would have even done that. right?
Right.
So that's a good sign, but that also means they're trying to get ahead of things, control the narrative, create plausible deniability,
Right.
disinfo, you name it, right?
Well, Craig says he agrees with you. He said, "Good point, Aaron. What if a threat came that forced some of the hidden tech to be used openly? Then they can't hide it. They have to explain that." Yeah, so it's a
Mhm.
great point. And you know what's interesting too? I think, okay, so this specific testimony right here is just as good as any book that we've read about UFO or ET disclosure um, from decades ago, right? But what I notice is that the older the book is, the more seriously the information is taken because people think, there's less mind control, less, obviously agendas and stuff back then. So whenever you read those old Pleiadian channelings or whatever it is, there seems to be more validity to it. But because we're here in 2025 saying, oh, this was written in 1980, this person must have known what they were talking about. But if you take this exact information that we're reading now and read it 20 years in the future, and still there's no disclosure in 20 years, and they look back on it like this must have been real. This guy was talking about this back in 2025. It doesn't mean that the old information is even valid either. Like we're just
Mhm.
assuming that these people knew what they were talking about because it was put into a book or whatever the case may be. And
Yeah,
these whistleblowers have the full picture because they don't. It's obviously compartmentalized. And he even says at the beginning that he would say that he's at a very low level of clearance compared to what else is happening. This is literally one very small part of the puzzle, piece of the puzzle.
right, right, exactly. Um, and just because there likely is some disinfo in there, doesn't mean all of it is BS. I think most of it resonates with me, and I think most of it, again, even if the specific details aren't exactly accurate, the general story I think is accurate. Um, and again, just because it's a possibility doesn't mean it's for sure definitely going to happen, but that doesn't mean the info was made up or is bad. That could have been one timeline or one possibility that, based on what happens from here on out, could not happen because things have changed, right? Because things are
Right.
isolated.
Well, and let's break down a few key things in the testimony. I like the fact that he was talking about an environmental replicator,
Mhm.
essentially that can create anything. Somehow it's tapped into the atmosphere, the environment of that planet, and creating abundance. Anything that they need is just manifesting for them. And then he also talked about the council, this group of, multiple groups of ETs having a self-replicating cities, bases on the ocean floor. What does he mean by that? Self-replicating. Is this some sort of AI that just, you build one of them and it builds more on its own? Does it mine
Right.
minerals and resources and I don't know, develop out
That,
its own infrastructure?
excuse me. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like well, and that's what, a lot of information I've come across and heard over the years of ETs. They use their own AI, they use their own drones and automated various things that kind of do a lot of work for them constantly. As far as even like ships that are coming here, it's like, oh, there's no one even on that ship. It's just a drone that's coming here to do a certain thing or to
Well,
get
most,
information. I think that's happening constantly. So it lines up with what I already know of like, yeah, I
right.
know stuff like that's already going on.
Well, most of I would say all of our advanced aerospace technology now,
Hmm.
following it on X like I do, it's all unmanned, all of it.
Right. Right.
Everything, helicopters, jets, drones, you name, I mean, down to very specific little things that you wouldn't even think needed to be unmanned.
Right. Because why
Uh,
wouldn't you do, if you have the technology to do that, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you man everything when it's unnecessary?
right.
Right.
Yeah, you're saving lives.
Right.
You're not putting anyone in danger. It can do all your recon for you.
Right.
It can give you a sit rep, you know.
Exactly.
Um, but I definitely resonate with the undersea civilization. We know that's been something we've heard about for a long time. And the fact
Mhm.
that, there's like different densities of water, which we've seen disclosed before. Like you go down so far and it's almost like quite literally a different type of liquid, a different density that looks like another water surface. And actually, the way Zaysan described one of the underwater cities he went to, as you go down further, the pressure intensifies and you just simply can't exist. He said they have a technology that basically can alter the density of the water to
Mhm.
make that pressure just as light as it is on the surface or near the surface.
Right.
So once you
Right.
enter that bubble, which it's quite literally a bubble underwater, once you penetrate that bubble, it's no longer,
They're
it's
they're in
dense.
their own atmosphere. Yeah,
Right.
I mean that's what all the USOs or the craft that come in and out of the ocean. Every story, what do you hear? Oh, it came in and out without a splash, without any, and one of the most prominent stories of that is William Cooper's own experience, where he talks about he's like, I was in the Navy, we're out on the ship, and we multiple of us all saw m- not just one, but many of these craft like coming out of the ocean, going up, and then coming back in, or something like that.
Right.
And he's like, not a sound, not a splash. And he's like, the velocity they were going would have like smashed to pieces any of our technology on the surface of the water, but it just goes in without anything. Like it's in its own little bubble. It's in
Right.
its own atmosphere. It's in its own gravity, everything. So of course they could do that with a base. If they can do that with craft, they're also going to do that with a base on the bottom of the ocean.
And even the beings themselves.
Right.
In fact, going back to Zaysan's testimony, he said whenever certain beings come and visit the Plagerian craft, they have a room specifically designed to create an atmospheric bubble around that specific being to mimic the atmosphere that's suitable for them. So if
Mhm.
it's an aquatic being, this aquatic being can come and have a meeting on the ship, and it will be in its comfortable environment and be able to thrive and survive, right? So,
Right.
um, and I'm just going to share this one more time for the people that weren't here at the beginning. Episode 279, Forrest Crawford, UFO Evidence Crash Retrieval Program, the Oscar case. Like I said earlier, it's one of our most underrated episodes. And I think there's a lot of parallels between this specific testimony and the testimony we just read from this Reddit whistleblower, Ray. There's a lot of correlations. In fact, like I said, it's one of our most underrated episodes. I think it's loaded with juicy information that I don't think is getting enough attention right now. So if anyone feels compelled, go back and watch that episode. I highly encourage that. And then,
Yes. Definitely watch it. It's amazing.
so Earth cousins, 10,000 years ago, brought to another planet, 5,000 years more advanced. I got the information right this time.
And you know what that also is the fact they did that is like proof that shows the whole galaxy, let's say. Look what humans would have been if not for all the suppression and abuse and manipulation that they've had for thousands of years, right? It's like to me, that's where we would have been by now. Um,
Right.
and it's proof. It's like you can see like we are the control group or whatever, and they're the control group and we're not whatever. Um, And in my opinion, yes, like it's the same exact beings put on a planet without the control, and then we have the control. And look what's happened to us, and look what.
Right.
So to me, as soon as the control ends, that's where we're going to go naturally,
Right. And
naturally.
we are the control group, like he said, like it was an experiment, right?
Right,
See what happens when this very specific exact group of humans um, ev- develops out and evolves on two separate planets with two different set of rules. And that's what happened. So, and
right,
even they weren't aware of their true history until he said a century ago. So that's really
right,
interesting. They found out that they actually came from Earth, which, you can imagine what that would have been like for them to find out, thinking that they're native to that planet. So they still had to go through their own sort of awakening, right? And I
right,
want to
right.
give our friend Craig Walker, who's in the chat as Mystic Gateway Podcast, I'm going to give him a shout out. He recently
Yeah,
just started a brand new podcast called Mystic Gateway Podcast. I think it's amazing. The first couple episodes are awesome, and I think there's an amazing energy behind what he's doing. And I highly encourage everyone to go subscribe. I think, he's already a week or two into his podcast, and Facebook has already removed his podcast channel until Christmas Eve, and he's already dealing with the censorship. But I think that's because he's bridging the gap between dogmatic religion and spirituality, or the galactic nature of our reality, right? So he's bridging that gap in a way that nobody is. It's a very specific intent behind his podcast and what he's doing. And I think that that's one thing that they definitely don't necessarily want getting out yet. It
Oh
is
yeah.
literally destroying the concept of religion. And not that religion is necessarily a bad thing. We've talked about this a number of times, but destroying that concept of a control box that keeps you
Ex
limited.
Expanding out of the box is how
Right.
I view it. Right.
So
They don't want
go
that.
over right now, go open another window, go to Mystic Gateway Podcast, like and subscribe. And I actually, in particular, really love episode one with Justin Abraham. I think it was absolutely incredible, actually, and I hope that we get to interview him as well. And apparently, according to Craig, he's got some next level information that he didn't even touch on in that interview. So go over there, check it out, give him a like and subscribe, and help build that community because I think he's on to something.
Yeah.
Uh, I guess that's it, guys. We don't have a whole lot more today. We don't have any current events pulled up or anything ready. 3i Atlas came and went. It was here close yesterday or whenever it was by now, a couple days ago. And yeah,
Um,
as many expected, it was just none of the fear mongering surrounding any of those narratives happened. And
right.
I think it's just very apparent that like like Gaia allowing these whistleblowers on to just like say, oh, it's full of reptilians and they're blah
They're
blah blah.
Draco. They're coming to destroy us or take over.
It's very apparent to me that most of these platforms are not really concerned about the truth. They're just concerned they want to be people want to be entertained. And there's so
Sensational, whatever
yeah,
sensational, or
whatever is
get people to
sensational. The
click
truth
and
doesn't
watch.
sell. The truth
Right.
doesn't sell like people think it would because the truth is hard. The truth is ugly. The truth requires you to go within and do some real work and change your life instead of looking
And
outside yourself to be entertained.
and then you have like, you know, you see that I saw so much confirmation about like
Oh, and today's
there
the winter
were
solstice. Sorry.
oh sorry, yes, today's happy winter solstice to everyone. But it's funny because I saw like I mean there were so many people getting so many different things, and I think I do think it was like based on where you're at, that's what you're gonna be a mirror to, and that's what you're gonna get from it. Um, but it's funny that there were some remote viewers that are considered by a lot of people very credentialed remote viewers, even though most, if not all of them, I have, I think is they get a mixed bag of truth and not truth because remote viewing is not 100%. Um, but they were like using their own little group of like the people that they're either friend, in with or consider credible. And they were like, oh, we're all getting Draco. So see, there's the proof that that's what it is. Meanwhile, thousands of people outside of that are getting complete opposite of that or very different.
Right.
And then you just like discard all of that and like, no, but look, these two or three people are getting the same as me. So that means it's true. And that we see that kind of stuff all the time. It's like confirmation bias, right? Like
Hmm.
you cherry pick and you find the things that agree with you, and then you use that as proof of whatever narrative you already want to believe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I agree. In
So
particular,
watch out for that.
well, it's funny to me that the concept of remote viewing is we know it's real and we know it works
Yeah.
and we know it's possible. In fact, I've taken a class and had success, but it's so, I mean, mind control is the name of the game right now. And there are
Yeah.
so many ways to interfere with the signal that you're getting, whether you're a remote viewer, a
Well,
channeler, whatever the case is.
right. And especially if you already know the target you're remote viewing,
Right,
that's you can't get more front loaded than that. Like
right,
the original remote viewing of that the military did specifically made sure that there was no front loading, and they would just do coordinates or a
right,
number or whatever. They don't know what they're viewing, and then they would get the data, and then they would then go be like, oh, this is what I was viewing, and it lines up. People are like, oh, there's a thing that I want to think is a ship that I do think, but still you're front loading. And then
right,
you already have preconceived beliefs of what you, even if it's subconscious, it's front
right,
loading. And then they're like, oh, I'm getting this. It's like, yeah, that's completely unreliable because you already knew what you were remote viewing, right?
right.
You
Yeah.
pretty much take that with a massive grain of salt at that point.
But I would also argue that there is a way to tap.
That
You
that
don't
being
have to call
said,
it remote
it's
viewing. Yeah.
right outside of the remote viewing box, there is ways to tap in, but I'm talking specifically the remote viewers that's all
Right.
they do, and
Right.
then they're being front loaded. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's like, well, you already know the target, so now you just get to make up what you want it to look
You're
like.
right. exactly.
Um, yeah, so I'm not dogging remote viewers either because we've interviewed a
No,
lot and I know people that
not at
do it
all. It's
and
very real. There's yeah,
yeah,
and those exact people, it doesn't mean everything that, I just think that when people run with these narratives as if like, oh, this is 100% true, no matter what, because this is what I'm getting and these other couple people, like, you can't ever,
right.
you
So
got to be open to being wrong, basically. And maybe
so
that's not as
anyway, guys, I don't know if this um did I put the link for the to read that testimony in the YouTube description? If I did, you can't click it on this channel anyway. But go on to our Facebook page and or my Facebook page, and you can find a link under the post for this episode. If you want to read through it yourself, and I will make sure I can find a way to get the link to everybody if you're interested in it. So I think this is absolutely amazing. Just use your discernment. I love the fact that people are coming out of the woodworks like this. And, whether or not it's true, I guess that's up for interpretation, but a
Mhm.
lot of it correlates with what we already know to be true, or at least believe to be true. And then it lines up with other testimonies. So there's something there. I think it's worth considering. We definitely can't rule it out. And I hope you enjoyed this today. Thank you guys for being here. And if you feel like joining us in Hawaii, there's still tickets available. You can go to our website, journeytotruth.online. You can find information about our Hawaii conference and our upcoming Secret Space Program documentary, which we're very excited about. And I guess that's it, unless you have anything else that you want to go over, Aaron.
I mean, there was one other thing, but
Yeah, go
uh,
ahead. We don't have
okay.
to.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw Jesse Michaels had on, he interviewed this guy who, what does it say, President of Russian Republic. So this guy
Oh, yeah, yeah. The guy who was a sitting president who was brought onto an alien
in
spacecraft. Yeah,
1997,
yeah.
right? And he's very detailed information about it, very fascinating. I haven't even watched it yet. I just saw Michael Solo's overview of it when
Yeah,
he's,
that's what I watched too, actually.
yeah, yeah, but I
Yeah.
want to watch it. So this guy, I mean, very credentialed, like he held senior political office, sat in Russia's state council, advised Vladimir Putin, met repeatedly with Henry Kissinger, Jimmy Carter, Pope John Paul II, and is close friends with the Dalai Lama. He says his UFO experience was acknowledged by Boris Yeltsin and discussed with Putin, and he also mentioned having a deep discussion about it with Henry Kissinger, who seemed to know all about UFOs before speaking with him. Um, and yeah, he goes into very, very detailed information about what he was told and his whole experience. And
And I
that
think,
just came
yeah,
out. So
I think that's amazing. It's credible.
yeah,
It's like Chaim Eshed saying there's a Galactic Federation,
it's
and
like on that level.
we have
Right.
human representatives or American representatives on underground bases on Mars. I mean, this coming on the disclosure has already happened, right?
Right.
Um, but I also it makes me wonder how Jesse Michaels, who he is, how he was
At
it.
the same time, yeah,
Where did he go to even film the interview? Like there was a number of questions I had, um, just questions. That's all.
right, right. Um,
And so
he's one of these like gets big, gets huge out of nowhere kind of
right.
people.
And then and like has Joe Rogan on his podcast. Like no
Right.
one's ever done that.
Right.
So
So
what
could be a
did some
controlled, again, like another controlled disclosure
so
kind of
somebody
thing.
Rhea
But
said, will there be virtual tickets for Hawaii? Yes. So right around the first of the year, we're gonna make live stream virtual tickets available. There will not be, so there's only 9 presenters across 3 days because the other 2 days we're going to be out on excursions and in the water and stuff like that. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to do package the virtual tickets. So stay tuned for that. Virtual tickets never sell until the last month anyway. So we weren't trying to, yeah, that's not really that important right now, but there will be some available. And coming in January, which we still have to kind of get this set up, but we are going to be doing a roundtable soon. We might have to rearrange our schedule a little bit because I want to squeeze this in a roundtable with presenters for the conference, and we can start getting the ball rolling with that and hyping it up because it's going to be here before we know it. And Hawaii was part of Lemuria, as far as I'm concerned, and we're going to
absolutely.
be doing some powerful grid work and activations there, and just amazing vacation with your soul family. So, if you feel compelled to join us, we would love to see you out there. And I think that's it. Thank you guys for joining us. We love you. And until next time, have a great evening. Good night.
Good night, guys. Love you.